I feared he was dead, but placing my hand on his heart, I found it still beating. After a while he came out of the faint, and in less than an hour he was sitting up in a chair telling me the cause of his trouble. He gave me the name Dr. Jekyll, and said that he was an English doctor traveling. Before the night was over, I knew his secret, and he knew my history. He believed he had found the drug which would change a man into another being. He had come to this quiet spot to make a first trial. Then, if death resulted, no one would ever know the cause. As you know, it failed, and I came upon the scene in time to save his life. He was very grateful to me for this, and finally persuaded me to go with him to London, where he said he would give me a home and cure me of my habit. The thing was tempting, and I accepted. Arriving here, I was given pleasant quarters, and established as a member of the household. I soon began to mend under the doctor's care, and felt something like my old self. I regained my old strength. Dr. Jekyll insisted, for some reason unknown to me, that we should not be seen together, and for that reason I never appeared in his part of the house unless he was absent. We had many talks, however, in his cabinet or in my rooms. During one of these talks, he spoke of his great discovery, which he expected to perfect soon, and that some day I might expect to see him as somebody else. And in regard to this change, he said he had left a will with one Utterson, by which, in case of his supposed death or disappearance, his money was to go to me, and furthermore, I was to deliver it to him in his new form. As I had no faith in his hopes, I agreed to all of this, and soon forgot it. With returning strength, I began to long for my old life as an actor, and I found myself trying to imitate Dr. Jekyll as a character. I entered into it as my one amusement, and soon became so proficient that I could imitate Jekyll in manners, expression, carriage, even in voice, to perfection. I knew this, for I tried it on the servants with unexpected success. However, I allowed Dr. Jekyll to gain no knowledge of this new acquirement. About this time, a new and peculiar phase of my illness presented itself. I found that at times I was afflicted with a deep craving for opium stimulants, and at such times there was a change in my nature. I became passionate and irritable. My temper was ungovernable. Often, while on the streets, these spells came over me, and I know that I was guilty of cruel and heartless acts. It was in one of these tantrums that I committed the worst crime a man can. For the first time since I knew him, Dr. Jekyll had taken a walk with me. We met Sir Danvers Carew, and I was introduced. The doctor being called away, I escorted Sir Danvers toward his home. We got into a warm discussion, and at the height of it, I felt one of these spells coming on. I was unable to keep my temper, and almost before I realized what I was doing, I had sprung upon the old man and felled him to the earth. Oh, the agony of shame and fear through which I passed when I realized it all. That night, I told Jekyll. Horrified as he was, he determined to help me. After getting me to write a short note to himself, to the effect that I had gone forever, he hid me in an old cellar under the court. There food was handed to me for about 2 days. But the third night it stopped, and I quietly stole out into my quarters. To reach them, it was necessary to pass through Jekyll's cabinet. As I entered the room, candle in hand, I stumbled over a body. It was Jekyll's. Glancing around, I saw papers of salts and vials on the tables, and I knew at once that Jekyll had again been trying his awful experiment. I found his heart still beating, and remembering a cabinet that had once been pointed out to me as containing the antidote of the powerful drug, I crossed to it and took out the vial. A paper there arrested my attention, and I found it to be Jekyll's will. I read it. By it, he gave his property to me. Why, he had already told me, but it was only in trust. Placing the vial on the table, I seated myself next to the body. Open near me was a case of surgical instruments, among which was a long, keen scalpel. Taking this from its cushion, I opened it, and advancing to the body, I knelt beside it. Just then, Jekyll gave a deep sigh, and opening his eyes, he raised himself on his elbow. Grasping him by the throat, I forced him back, at the same time plunging the knife into his side. With a shriek, he tore himself free, and half ran, half crawled to the door. But I was there before him. Just as he tottered against me, I ran the blade into his throat, and he fell without a cry. I buried the body beneath the passageway, and washed the floor and door free from blood. Now that the deed was done, and I had 2 murders on my hands instead of 1, I was sorely troubled as to what to do. If I ran for it, I ran the risk of capture for the murder of Carew. If I stayed here, as soon as Jekyll was missed, they would search and find me. The case seemed desperate. There was only one way left. Jekyll must not be missed. It was absolutely necessary for my safety. How I thanked the whim that caused me to study him. But could I do it? That was the question. I determined upon a desperate trial. I formed a plan, whereby I appeared one night before Dr. Lanyon, a friend of Jekyll's. There I pretended to change myself, by a drug, to Jekyll. It was a remarkable piece of acting, to judge from its success, its effect on the horrified Lanyon. I could have hugged myself for joy. At least for a time I was safe. After his recovery from the seeming horror of it all, Lanyon wanted the history of my discovery. As I knew of none to tell him at the time, I promised to write it, providing he would not make it public until after my, as Jekyll, death. He promised. And so, disguising my hand as well as I could, and imitating that of Jekyll, I wrote a most remarkable letter, which I think eventually hoodwinked Dr. Lanyon. All this was a terrible strain upon me, and without the restraining hand of Jekyll, I returned once more to the opium. This was 2 weeks ago. Since then, my change has been frightfully swift. My willpower, my strength, have deserted me in a night, as it were, just as they did years ago in America. I have lost all power to act out the miserable farce of my life. I cannot assume the upright carriage of Jekyll. I cannot keep the muscles of my face under control. God knows I have tried hard enough. With my nerves quieted with opium, I have stood before my glass and bravely, desperately, tried to assume the form of that man, but in vain. The cursed opium has done its deadly work, and I am a doomed man. It is a week now since I last appeared in the dining room as Jekyll, and at any moment my doom may come. Here, in the last lonely hours of my life, some flickering spark of the man I once was prompts me to make this slight amends to the memory of the man who was my benefactor and last friend. And although I killed him, my best friend. Did I say last friend? No. That little vial on the table is my last friend. The end. End of The Untold Sequel of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Recorded by Chuck Williamson, 2017.